Hey, everybody, and welcome to this session of the Metrics That Matter Summit. We're going to be talking about how to present your education metrics to leadership. My name is Shannon Howard. I'm the Director of Customer and Content Marketing here at Intellum. I'll be your host for today, but definitely not your speaker because you're going to get to hear from my friend Debbie Smith. Before we turn it over to Debbie, just a little bit of housekeeping. The first thing is that this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to come back to it later, if you got to hop off halfway, all good. There's a Q&A box, so we'll be doing questions a little bit later. It's also a way that you can chat with us during the presentation, so you can find that under your video. Under the video, you'll also find some attachments, including slides from our presentation today and a guide that we put together for you to kind of take action on the things that we've been talking about. I also want to make a note, so you'll see slides on your screen, but this platform will default to like whatever setting based on your internet bandwidth. So if we look a little blurry to you, there's a little gear icon in the bottom of your screen. Click on that and you can go to a higher resolution and that should solve your problems. But if you have any questions about that, again, put them in the Q&A and I'll help you out. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our guest, Debbie Smith. She is the Senior Director of Vizier University, has been in customer education for a long time, has a wealth of wisdom. She's also the president of the Customer Education Management Association, so the only professional organization specifically for customer education professionals. And so she's going to be walking us through today what she presents to her leadership team. So if we make sense of all these many metrics that we could measure and could talk about, how do we actually take that and then talk to our executive leadership team? And I'm going to actually, we're going to do a Slido here. So if folks want to pull up, you can go to slido.com. 1707706 is the number that you'll type in there, or you can do a little QR code. We're gonna have two questions for you today, so stay on the Slido. But Debbie wants to know, what metrics do you track? And Debbie, maybe you can tell us a little bit, why did you want to ask this question in the beginning while people are answering the question?
We want to talk about what different metrics there are, and we track metrics and we report metrics. So I'm interested in seeing what you're thinking about tracking. And I just said to Shannon, I didn't fully take into consideration full audience. So I really focused on customer education metrics, but please feel free to ask questions when we go through impact, because I can also flip those to sales enablement or to L&D metrics, because we can measure impact of all training. I just did focus on the customer education ones to begin with. So I'm wondering what people are tracking right now. Attendance and completion rates. Those are really common ones that most of us track. Just going to give it a minute to see. Certifications, course completion, ILT attendance, customer retention, CSAT, NPS, mandatory training completion, unique users. Yes, unique users is a good one too. Along with completions, NPS, CSAT, month over month, total learners, total orgs. Yep, getting into penetration there. New business, course completion. So a lot of metrics around our programs, consumption, course completion. Those are all program metrics. Help center views, learner engagement, new user registration. Lots of different metrics that we're seeing here. Returning users. Oh, good one. Number of unique learners. Still have a few people typing. Churn, learning, consumption. Yep. Oh, quiz analytics. Yes, good. By role and average quiz scores. Retention, support ticket deflection. Yes, support ticket reflection is a big one. Time saved and labor cost saved. Great efficiency metric. Active people in the solution versus in customer education platforms. Yes. Great. Let's see, what are we actually reporting on? So we've talked about what we're tracking, and I'm curious to see if we're reporting on the same things that we're tracking. Yep, retention rate. I see it coming through on the questions. And I see a few people typing in here what they're reporting on by roles and scores on quizzes. My guess is that's probably an internal reporting. ILT attendance, CSAT, trained users per account, onboarding completion rate, ARR. Usually the reporting asks is just completions, registrations, and CSAT. Interesting. Engagement by segment, engagement funnel users in the academy, roles and completions. Yep. Love that answer. Yes, it depends on what leadership cares about, and that's exactly where I'm going. Product subscriptions after academy engagement. Yep, that's a great one. Attendees and registrants for workshops. Time to value. Time to value is always such an interesting one, because as companies, we tell customers when we think their time to value is, but I'd love to know how we actually get that from our customers, what their value is, because that's the real one. Customer health and learning, yes, that's a huge one. Churn, learner consumption, correlation with adoption and health, feature adoption. So it looks like we're reporting on lots of different things. And we'll give it one more minute for the last two people to finish typing. Certifications, if you have certification in your program, that's always a big reporting, because that has the biggest impact of all of the programs in my experience. And I've had some pretty impressive numbers with certification. And is that the last one, Shannon, coming through?
Yes, it looks like.
Okay. And attendance, and just start to analyze usage based on learner segments. Yeah, once you can start segmenting, it really can change what you can report on. So let's flip back over to the slide deck. I don't know how to do that one. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. So when I think of metrics, and I think of metrics in buckets of categories. So the categories that I think about are the engagement. Engagement metrics are all of the metrics around the program running. So when I think about engagement, I'm thinking about completions, users. When I think about penetration, I'm thinking about how wide and how deep do I go? So how many customers am I in out of my customer base? And then within a particular customer, how deep is that? And I think of impact from two different perspectives. I think of it from a sales and a CS perspective. And those are really the numbers around the ARR, the churn, feature adoption, user adoption. And then I also think about impact as support, because we can really affect support. So things like time to resolution and the amount of cases. And then financial, how you report on financial if you're a profit center. Understanding your full financial is really important, including understanding your profit margin and not just the dollar margin. And then the last thing is productivity. And these are the things that really impact the efficiency, both of your team and of your company. So those are the buckets that I usually think of. And I have a spreadsheet that I keep that has, I think, about 38 different metrics that I actually track across everything. So let's take a dive into each of these, and we'll talk about what each of these are. And then I'll give you an example of how I have reported on them. Engagement. So engagement are all of these business metrics that are our learning business metrics. This is typically what we'll call the butts and seats measurements, and it's the measurements that normally matter most to us in a learning program. And so it's our enrollments, the number of enrollments per person, the number of users, individual unique users, and then course completion, looking at both courses, lessons, paths, certification numbers, and pass rates. Those are all things that we look at around completions. Time spent in course and lessons, and CSAT. I use a 5-star rating to do my CSAT, and I think of that as separate from the company CSAT. Yes, Nicole, I will send my spreadsheet over to Shannon to share that out with everyone, because it is something that I have carried from multiple companies now. I've been at about 6 different SaaS companies, and we've actually used the same set of measurements at all the companies that I've been at, and we've iterated and added to it, so I will share that with you. When I look at engagement metrics, I want to be sure that I'm telling a story. Most of my engagement metrics don't need to be shared, but I had a story that I wanted to tell. And I think it's really important that when we're looking at metrics, that we tell a story with it. One thing that I've learned recently is to stop naming my charts with what's in it. So instead of saying in the top of my chart that I'm looking at the number of users in my management system month over month, instead I actually put in for the title now what I want people to take away from it. This has really changed the way people hear me when I talk about my metrics. So my point in this is I was trying to change my system. So I was showing that this is from my community, because I also manage community. The number of people posting is decreasing. So I can see it in the blue line, but by adding the trend line, I was able to say to my manager, hey, if we don't do anything else right now, look what happens between October and November. The community's dead. The numbers are just continually decreasing. We've been watching it decrease now for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. So we have to do something. This is a much more impactful statement than if I had just shown the chart. Often we don't even need to show a chart. We just need to show a total number. So the question that we had was like, what was the total number of users in 24 versus in 25? And yes, we're at one of those SaaS companies that we're already in FY25. So in FY24, we had 710 users. And then in FY25, at the point that I pulled this data, we only had 205 users. That says there's something really wrong right there. So this chart with a combination of colors and the labels is really able to call that out for my end users. The next one that I really take a look at is penetration. And penetration is really important where I am right now, because we're really trying to move towards self-service. So when I look at penetration, I'm looking at accounts, the number of accounts and the percentage of accounts trained. My goal always is to get to as many customers as I can. I had one chief customer officer ask me why I didn't set my goal to 100, and I didn't set a goal to 100 because it's not realistic initially, right? So each year I want to try and add a 10% to this goal. Charlotte had a question. How can I get this data internally? Charlotte, which data was that? I'll come back to that afterwards. I also look at the number of users. So when I look at the number of users, I want to look at the number of users across accounts and in accounts. So, and then attach rates. We want to look at when we're closing deals, are we attaching training to every deal, or what is the attach rate? And I've had different goals at different companies. And some companies don't even measure these. If companies aren't measuring these things, I'm still measuring them, because even if no one wants to know it right now, I know someone will want to know it in the future. So I track everything. So the chart that I was on, Charlotte, I'll go back. This chart here, this is very easily pulled in an Excel chart. It's just graphing two different numbers and then asking them to add a trend line. This is a trend line chart. We have trend lines in our product in Visier. Excel has it and Google Sheets has it. Okay, so attachment rates. When I look at attachment rates, instead of calling out what I'm seeing, and I'm putting attachment rates up here for you so you can see it, but that wouldn't be in my slide for my team. I would just say we can drive more revenue by attaching training to all deals, because I can show that in our named accounts, which are our largest accounts, we're only including training in 18% of those accounts. We could really drive revenue if we added more in the named and in the enterprise. So changing the way that I title these changes the conversation with the leadership. And I've also found that normally I don't do full metric reviews anymore with leadership, because they usually want one piece of data at the time. So it's really figuring out which data is important to which leader and then presenting that to them. So if I'm talking to my CRO, this is something I'm going to show him, because he cares more about the attachment rates than my marketing, than my chief marketing officer does. My chief marketing officer has other things that he's more interested in. So I want to make sure that I'm tailoring the message to the right person. Sales and impact. Sales and CS impact. So I report into the chief customer officer right now. So our big metrics are around adoption, churn, and risk levels. And then ARR is secondary for him right now. And the reason it's secondary is because of something that we hear all the time, is it's really a correlation metric. And proving the causation can be difficult, but there are ways to do it with A/B testing, which I'm really dying to do, and I hope I get to do it next year, is really do some A/B testing, but also do some filtering around the ARR results so we can really dive into it. So Amelia asked, how do you navigate corralling these metrics when you don't have access to database such as Salesforce or Gainsight? So Amelia, it's a pain in the neck when you have to do this manually, and I have done it manually. If I didn't have access to Salesforce, then I would ask my RevOps team to pull a Salesforce customer report and do it manually. There are some templates out there to help you build those. It makes it easier to really understand if you have a template to work off. Pam is asking, what pushback are you getting around attaching training to these accounts? And are we pushing training in new accounts or for existing? So the attachment just becomes because it's not always convenient for sales to add it. So if our price quoting tool isn't set up to automatically add it, it's just that extra checkbox of that extra work that sales has to do. So what we really need to do for that, if we want to attach it to everything, is automate it. But until we automate it, it's a matter of dealing with the individual sales reps and their managers. And we try to get training into both new and existing accounts. I don't count my customer onboarding training as training because everyone goes through it. So it's not going to have as big of an impact. Looking at ARR and churn, where I do look at my customer onboarding training, my project team training, is in my efficiency metrics instead. When I was at the first company that I was at that I did certification, when I got really excited about certification, this is actually a stat that we had. We had a 99% renewal rate for companies that had at least one certified builder. And we were able to show that companies who had a certified builder did not churn for the 2 years that we were tracking it while I was there, which was really a cool rate. So showing that in a chart wouldn't be super helpful to the leadership, but just showing that one number is much more impactful. Impact for support. So support, we really look at two different things. Something that was interesting to me when I really started working with support is we don't actually want to get rid of all support cases. That's a misnomer. There are some support cases we want to keep because they help push the product to the next level. Those are those higher level questions. So when we look at support types, we also look at the case types, the case volumes, the number of things that they're submitting, and then the time to resolution. So the most recent support numbers that I looked at were that trained customers submit 50% less how do I type questions. Those are those questions that really could be helped through training. So those are ones that we can definitely eliminate with self-serve, and we can save a lot of time across the company. Matthew over at Therapy Brands. Yes, I mean real certifications, product certifications. So certification is not tied to training. It's a separate independent exam. And if it's a separate exam and it is both reliable and valid, which means that you've followed the full process to develop the certification, that's when it has that type of impact. If your certification doesn't follow the full process to for a reliable and valid certification, it doesn't have the same impact. It will still have some impact, but it will have impact more along the lines of training than certification. The next type of metrics that I look at are really the financial metrics. And financial metrics, we have to look at total revenue, investment revenue, actual revenue, and margin. So investment revenue was something I didn't understand when I first started, and I was only tracking my total revenue. And then I realized that I had a problem. And the problem that I had was we were delivering almost $600,000 in training, but we were only charging for 200 of it. So therefore, when you looked at my numbers, I wasn't hitting my goal because the company was giving it away. So I learned to start tracking the investment dollars too. That also changed the conversation. When I show my CRO that we are giving away more training than we're selling, he right away wants to know which sales reps are doing it, because he doesn't want them giving it away either, because we do know that people who pay for training have even higher ARR than those who don't. And it makes sense because you're more invested in something that you pay for. Productivity metrics. So this is the first place that at Visier is the first time I've had real productivity measurements. So we actually had an OKR that was a top level company OKR that we had to create 14 courses because it played into our business goal of opening the platform and making everything more self-sufficient. So we needed all of the courses that taught that. Number of courses created and the number of courses per person. My LXDs are amazing. And we've come up with a new process for developing all of our training, which is allowing us to develop training faster. And because of that, they're actually creating more than a course a month. So we were able to do that. And we were also able to prove efficiency that we cut SME meeting time from 10 hours, on average of 10 hours per course, to 1 hour a course. So there was a lot of efficiency in that. We don't always have to present everything in a chart. So this was our fun graphic for tracking our courses. And if you're familiar with Canva, this is really easy to maintain. For one of my LXDs, Katja Cathal, designed this for us. And so we use this to actually showcase what we were building. Now this has been completed. I pulled a mid sample to see one of the creative ways that we can report. So we were building builder courses. She added Nike's shoes onto our builder. This is Sally the builder, who is the female counterpart to Bob the builder. It just so happens my whole team at the moment is female. But my boss is always wears Nikes, so she added the Nikes in there for that bit of personalization, so it would resonate with him. And this is how we've been sharing with the company our actual progress around our OKR, which we met in July. On July 31st, we did meet it and have all 14 courses built. And then, so what type of reporting do I do? The reporting I do is very sparse here and there with the types of numbers that I've just shown you. The end of each year, though, or actually every 6 months is really what I do it, but I do a university by the numbers. So I actually track how many users we've trained, and I want to show year over year improvement. So this year, in our private training, we trained 1,200 users, where the previous year we only did 538. That's a 125% increase. Actually calling out the increase so that people don't have to figure that out really helps. I also highlight how much over our goal we went, and tracking this year's and last year's numbers. Emily is asking about the changes to the content creation process that saves so much time. Yes, what we did that saved time was something that when I talk to people who've been doing curriculum development for a while, they're like, oh yeah, no, of course I do that. But it's something that we don't think about when we start. Instead of meeting with SMEs to understand what to do in product, we started with a jobs to be done framework. So we listed all of the tasks that someone could do in product. Once we had that listed, we then grouped them into courses. When we group those into courses, the LXD start each course development by writing a full use case and starting with the use case and drawing it all the way through. Once they've written the use case, they actually go into product and do it the same way a customer would do it, with no one guiding them, with no help. This gives them customer empathy, and it helps them figure out where the customers might get stuck so that they can incorporate that into their course. Just flipping it so that they had to do the use case and then go into product is what saves so much time. It makes the courses better, and it's a much stronger course for our users, but it's also much better for our BIs or our SMEs, which are our expensive resources. So there's two types of reporting that I do at the end of each year, and it's the university by the numbers, the private training, and then my public training. And my public training is when this is both for internal and then just to my boss, because my boss actually does care about completion rates, because we are in the HR space, so it's something he's familiar with looking at. So we made a major change last year in our platform. And when we made our major change, we increased course completion, increased the number of usage, and increased our completion rates from 44 to 77%. Completion rates don't matter a whole lot to me, other than the fact that it says someone actually liked the course enough to complete it. I'm more concerned with what they do in product afterwards, and I'm really looking to get all of those measurements done next year so that I can start to track the in-product usage. I've had the ability to do that at other companies, but I haven't been able to do that here yet. Questions?
All right, so the questions box is underneath. So you can also share your feedback, but the questions box is underneath this video. So I know we've been answering questions as we go, but if you have questions, especially, I know people have asked, like, how do you corral these metrics? Earlier someone said the metric that they were reporting on was the one that was important to the leader. So if you have any questions on this, Debbie is a great resource, and now is the time. So you can pop those into the Q&A below, and we'll pull those in. All right. I'm not seeing any
I'm not seeing it either, Shannon.
Yeah, I think you may have been like very efficient in your presentation of slides and then also answering questions as we went, which is really nice to kind of have those in the context of which that they were asked. Oh,
How hard is it? Support data is actually the easier data to get, I find, Christine, because I usually get access to whether it's Zendesk or ServiceNow or QuickBase. I've used those. And when I do, I can pull those all down myself and do all that analysis myself. I do find that it's really hard to wait for BI time to get all of the data. So a couple times a year, I do all of the analysis myself until I get the dashboard set up. Dashboard setup can take a long time. I've almost got mine here set up at Visier right now. So the next time I do this, I'd like to be able to present it in Visier. Christine,
right. Yeah, I was gonna, sorry, go for it.
Do you want to read one or do you want me to?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say we have all the questions now. So Britt had asked to confirm you're only sharing these numbers with the leaders 1 to 2 times a year. Are you sharing these in a formal meeting or how are you sharing these?
Great question. So a couple of things. I end up tracking these measurements, these numbers, they're in my head. So when we're in a meeting and someone asks a question, I can drop the number right away. So I actually have most of these memorized. And I was in a meeting with one of my direct reports the other day, and she's like, I noticed that you're just dropping those data metrics all over the place and you don't have them open. I'm in tune with them enough that I need to know what they are, because that way they just roll off my tongue and I don't have to present a deck of metrics. If I present a deck of metrics, they shut down and stop listening. So it's in the moment when I need them is when I'm usually using them. Okay.
All right. I can pull through here because I know, yeah, now all the questions are coming in, which is great. Like you have Debbie's time and she's an incredible resource. Okay. Belia asked what strategies are guiding how you prepare to gather product adoption metrics.
Okay. So product adoption metrics are really the coolest metric. And so one of the best things that I had done was when I was at Braze, we actually looked at, after taking one of our courses, and we went in course by course. There was one course that we were teaching on Liquid, which is the Shopify language. We showed that people who went in and took that course, they wrote 5 times more campaigns, because Braze is a campaign management tool, customer engagement platform. But not only did they write 5 times more, their open rates like doubled, right? So they learned enough to really change what they were doing, that their open rates, so we could actually see the customer impact. So figuring out how you can actually tell when your customers are getting value from your product and then tracking that. At Visier, we do have our own tool, which does some Visage, but I'm also hoping to get something like Gainsight PX or Pendo. I've had those in the past, but we all know at a SaaS company that those can sometimes be a little bit difficult if your product wasn't built with unique IDs on everything. So tracking it can be difficult.
Which I said earlier, everything is going to lead to the next thing. Our last session of the day is with Lisa from Amplitude, and she's going to talk about instrumenting your academy. Yeah. Okay, how do you get buy-in for, James actually has 2-part question. I'm going to scroll up for the second half. How do you get buy-in for enrollment and completion? Let's say you have a team that's very high performing, and then the other is not, but managers on these teams are not bought in. How do you convince executives that it's not education's responsibility, or not just their responsibility?
Well, first you'd have to show that your education is actually having the effect, right? So you need to actually do cohort analysis that's showing that the training that they're taking is impacting what they're doing, and that it's tightly related to what they're actually supposed to be doing for their career. So if it's sales training, if they go through a certain training, like if they go through medic training, are they closing more deals, right? If it's leadership training, are the leaders who are going through that training, are their engagement scores higher on the teams under them? Is their regrettable turnover lower? Right? So really looking at the metrics that matter to the people is how you really get that buy-in.
Which kind of leads into Christine's question. So if maybe you don't know which metrics are most important, what are some ways to predict what metrics executives will want to see based on where they sit in the organization or their background?
So one of the first things I always ask every one of the leaders is, what are the metrics that matter to you? What is your KPI? What is your OKR? What is your MBO, whichever term you're using, because we all use different ones. But every executive is measured on something. And so what is it that they're measured on? And once you know what they're measured on, then you know what's important to them, because we all do things to actually help our own measurements move forward, right? Which makes sense. So really aligning with whatever their team is responsible for.
All right. I'm going to say jug beer, but let me know if I said this wrong. Can you explain what the utilization metric and productivity means?
Yes. So when we utilization metrics for trainers, we, depending on the company, we've had different required utilization rates. When I was at Smartsheet, I had a team of about 20 trainers, and they were supposed to be at 80% utilization, which meant they were supposed to be 80% of the time customer facing. So, and here at Visier, all of my team is supposed to be 80% utilized. So that means 80% of their time is supposed to be focused on doing customer facing work, even if it's not directly with the customer. So if the rates are falling below that, then I'm not managing correctly. If the rates are over that, then they're actually doing more work than we should have them doing. So that means I need to add more headcount. So that's why that utilization is really important to me as a manager, is it helps me figure out when I can add more headcount.
Love it. Okay, Olivia, for your attachment rate reporting, are you looking at that for just paid training, or are you also looking at that for the public university?
So for my attachment rate, I only look at that from a sales, because we're talking about attaching it to sales. When I'm looking at in e-learning, I'm actually looking at the penetration rate. So I'm looking to see, did I hit 50% of my customer base, 90%, 100% of my customer base? And then within each customer, how deep did I go? Do I have 2 people that are taking training? Do I have 100 people that are taking training? So really just 2 different sides of the same coin.
All right. Matthew has a question. How important is having SSO between your product and then education, knowledge-based community, all these different platforms for driving engagement and enrollment?
So I've said this out loud before. I'll say it again. I know some people don't like to hear it, but I won't work for a company who doesn't want to do SSO to the LMS. And if you're not going to give me access to Salesforce and my Gainsight data, then you don't want me. Because I have to have those things. If I don't have SSO and I don't have the Salesforce or Gainsight data, then I can't actually do my job, because I can't tell what impact I'm doing, and I can't tell if I'm actually hitting my goals. So I know if a company won't invest in that, then they're not invested in the education program at all. And we're just going to be doing the same thing, butts and seats measurements that we've been doing for the last 100 years.
All right. You heard it. You heard it here from Debbie. I love it though, because it is indicative of investment, interest in education.
Yep.
Okay. Carrie, what types of metrics would you recommend tracking if you don't have certification or courses set up? So Carrie, if you do have an opportunity to specify maybe what you're doing, what kind of education you're offering, that might be helpful. But Debbie, based on how the question is written, do you have initial thoughts?
So if you don't have certification or courses set up, then I'm going to make the assumption that you are either using Help Center or you're using videos. So then really the only thing you can really measure then is page views, and then you can try to draw a correlation with, like, if someone's watched if people have watched a certain how-to article more than anything else, and we see support tickets drop off in that, you could measure that way. But it's really hard to track and show your impact if you don't have courses set up or your SSO tied into your Salesforce or your HubSpot, whatever your CRM is.
All right, so Vivian's question kind of builds on that. What is the best way to develop a certification program if you don't have budget for an LMS?
So a certification follows a full build. So in order to build a certification, you have to start with a job task analysis to identify what you're testing on. You have to define who the minimally qualified candidate is. Then you have to write the exam and then deliver the exam, and the exam has to be proctored. That's the high level of what has to happen for certification. You actually don't need an LMS for that. There are certification platforms that you can use. I use a certification platform in conjunction with my LMS. I'm a huge fan of the Cavion platform because I can do exam delivery through it, and it feeds everything back into the LMS for me. But if I didn't have the LMS, I could do it freestanding.
All right, the last question we have for now. How do you analyze impact for internal training to process and workflow?
Great question. So when we're looking at internal impact, it depends on which type of training we're doing, right? So if you're doing compliance training and it's phishing that you're training on, it's sending the phishing test emails. I don't know if anyone else's company has started doing a lot of those, but we do a lot of those now. How many people actually read the email and click on the link, right? And that reports it back to us. So we're actually testing to see if they learned it. With time carding, do people who have taken the time carding course, do they time card more consistently than those who don't? A CSM who has gone through Gainsight training, are they actually tracking their customers' data better in Gainsight? So looking at the actual job that they have to do and how the training that we're doing is actually impacting the outcome of the job. And that Visier actually has a program that does that. That's one of our modules that we can plug in the data from the learning management system and then show the impact that the training has on your retention, employee engagement, and all of that type of thing.
All right, Irene has a question. Do you have recommendations for how to take an internal program external to become a revenue generating program? That's a great question.
Yes, so an internal program external, I guess the first question I'd have to ask is, was it written with an internal focus or an external focus? We did that at Visier. We had a people analytics consultant course that we were teaching, which was actually derived by teaching initially our own consultants. So we did flip that around and make that an external facing and a paid program, but we did have to rewrite a lot of the language to be more customer focused. So making sure that the customer language was spot on was our primary goal first. And then getting the buy-in from leadership to actually start pricing it and putting it into Salesforce. The hardest part is making sure you fit into the right timing for your company. Every company has their own timing for go-to-market launches, and usually you have to fit into your go-to-market launch with your product team and your sales enablement team. So the first thing I would recommend doing is connecting with your sales enablement leader, because they're the ones who are going to sell it for you. So you need to get on their good side before you do anything else if you want to go to market with anything.
Awesome. And then Mary posted back, we do use external cyber training and use their phishing email program. There you go. Well, maybe a quick follow-up question. So you mentioned in Visier that you can look at your LMS data and you can look at Visier and see impact on like what employees specifically here have done. What would be your recommendation for people who don't have a platform? Do you have people self-report? Do you trust self-reported feedback?
Yes. So you have to do it at the beginning stages of it, right? If you don't have the technology to do it, you do it the easiest way you can, right? And I think the hardest word for me to learn, it was really, really one of the most painful words for me to learn, directionally accurate. I actually hate the word, but now I use it all the time because my data has to be directionally accurate when I'm reporting, but they don't actually care about the minutiae of the detail, which is surprising to me because I'm so in the weeds detailed. So making sure that it's directionally accurate and that self-reporting can get you directional accuracy.
And can you just say real quick, what does directional accuracy mean if people have not heard that term before?
So directionally accurate means it's about right. It's close enough. It's not perfect, but we know that it's close. There's probably some data missing. It sounds logical. It makes sense. And there's no other data that's refuting it. So we're about 75% sure it's right.
Okay. Awesome. So like I know Google Analytics, we would consider that to be directionally accurate.
Yes.
It may not have the exact number of page views and unique visitors, but if we look at it over time, we can use that as a comparison. All right. Exactly. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you, Debbie, for your time, your insights. Go connect with Debbie online. Check her out in the Customer Education Management Association Slack group. You can engage with her there. I put a link to the next session. So the next session is with the Director of Learning and Certifications at Meta. He's going to be talking about, so Debbie, you were mentioning, in the beginning stages. So he's actually kind of built out their certification program from scratch. And so he's going to be walking through what did it look like in the early days and then now to kind of build out measuring business impact. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope to see you in the next session. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.